Hey guys. All right. We're gonna work hard, so roll up your sleeves. Everybody jazzed? How would you take your shirt off? Not shirt, please. Your blazer. Untie the bow tie. It's just that time. How's it going so far? Are we enjoying CAST? Yes. How was Ash? Awesome. Yeah. I'm so excited for them and their little kid. I have 3 little kids, and I love kids, and I'm excited they get to experience that. That's awesome. So I'm Paul Merrill from Beaufort Fairmont. You've heard all that. We focus on test automation. If you haven't gotten that by now, you're just not paying attention. So if you need help with that, give me a yell. What a lot of people don't know about me is that I started out in writing. So I lived in Florida, in Jacksonville. I decided to go to Florida State University, here in Florida, yes. Are you a Gator or something? Oh, okay. Oh, Bama, okay, well, you guys win everything anyway. So my mom tells me that the reason that I went to Florida State was because I filled out the easy application form and faxed it in. That was the easiest one to go to. And I don't mind the path of least resistance if I can find it, so she's probably right. What I found with my major in college when I went to Florida State was I didn't want to declare right when I went in. I wanted to go to a school that had a liberal arts background, and they also had an engineering program so that I had lots of choices and that I could learn lots of things and have more of a complete education is the way that I felt about it. When I got into school, I took English 101, composition, whatever it is, right? Started writing in there. I had a philosophy class I had to write in. They didn't want to let me in. They let me in as a freshman for some reason. I don't know if they had a quota or what, but I got in. And I had another course where I was writing as well. And every paper that I wrote, I got an A on. It's like, well, let's do this, right? I'm going to be a writer. So I got into the English department with a focus on writing, on creative writing. Literature majors and writers are 2 very different types of people. Literature majors, you give a stack of books, the stack gets smaller. Over the course of a week, they just digest it. They can read through it very quickly. Writers, on the other hand, will take a book and just study it, word for word, for long periods of time. I read slowly. My wife reads fast. I asked her the other day, I said, how do you do that? She says, do you read every single word? I'm like, yeah, how else would you read? Like, what are you talking about? Yes, I read every single word. So a lot of people ask me, I went into computer science later on. And in computer science, I got out and people would say, look, computer science and English, those 2 things don't go together. What's the deal? To me, they're both forms of communication. Whether it's by writing, and that's a clear form of written communication, right? Or it's by computer science and writing programs. I communicate in the code that I write. People look at the code, they have to be able to read it later on and understand what's going on. I communicate by the execution of that code. When it runs, people have to be able to understand what's going on. We're usually exchanging information with the applications we write with human beings a lot of times. So there's communication in each one of them. You're also taking thoughts out of your head and you're persisting them somewhere, whether it's on a piece of paper, in a computer, in a programming language, any of those things. You're taking a concept and persisting it. So then I got out, and a little while later, I got into testing. I've enjoyed testing. Testing has been the most welcoming community I think I've ever been a part of. It's a cool place to be. I enjoy being here and working with you all. And what I found over time is that some of the things that I learned in writing, I believe, can be applied to testing. So today, that's what I want to do, is look through some of the exercises that we did in that creative writing program and take them and figure out how they can help us with testing. Good with that? All right. The slides are an older version because of... That's not today. No. Sorry about that. Come to the webinars for that. So I know for myself, if you put me in a room where you had all the different media for art and you had all different things to create on and you said, go at it, I think I'd just get stuck. How many people would just get stuck there? Yeah? How many people have seen beautiful works of art that were created with constraints? I think the statue of David, the David, I believe, was a piece of granite, I'm not sure what, a piece of stone, that was shaped in such an odd way that they said nothing could be done with it. And here we get this great masterpiece, David, right? Pretty cool stuff. I think the constraints around our problems help us be creative sometimes, more so than the freedom of different media. So that's one of the things about creation that I found. The other part of this that I want to tell you about is a slight story and where I came up with this next exercise, our first exercise. Angie Jones and myself did a workshop called the Dominoes of Automation. And I think a couple of folks at the conference saw that at one point or another. It was a fun workshop. The idea was to take dominoes, set them up, topple them down. Fun is fun at any age, right? And we found, yes, that's true. People love stuff like this, especially if you didn't get a bunch of dominoes to play with when you were a kid. Now we can live that again. We used dominoes to talk about the concepts of test automation. And we used this game. The first step in that workshop was for everybody to be allocated a certain number of dominoes. It was very important that they had a good number of dominoes. The way that we did that was we had each person sit down and write down test cases. And each of those test cases would be represented by a domino. So we gave everybody 5 minutes to write down test cases. We did this workshop 3, 4, 5 times. And over the first few of them, what we noticed was that each time people struggled to come up with a high number of tests. They struggled. So in 5 minutes, I would see people looking up and tapping their pen, trying to think of something, right? We gave them applications under test that they knew, whether it was Google, LinkedIn, their own application, whatever it was, well-known applications. So this should not be a problem for us as testers, right? I mean, you give me a piece of paper and I can talk about it for 10 minutes and not stop, right? There are a lot of ways to test anything. So where was this problem coming from? We tried several different approaches to get people to come up with more test cases so that they can get more dominoes, because dominoes are not so much fun up until you have about 10 of them, and then you hit this nice meaty part of the fun curve for dominoes, and then you get past 50 and it starts to go down a lot. There's like a diminishing utility there, right? Because they're all going to topple over them, and you set up 50 and it's just annoying at that point. So we found you needed 10, 20 dominoes, something like that, to do it. And in 5 minutes, we couldn't come up with 10 a lot of times. So I thought, let's find a way to be more creative. Maybe there's a problem in the testing community with some people about creativity. How do we exercise that? How do we get farther along? So this first exercise that we're going to do, and I told you, roll up your sleeves here. Let's get ready to work. You'll need a pencil and paper, a pen and paper. You can use your laptop if you would like to. I would encourage you to consider on your laptop something that I prefer, which is go as old school as possible. If you're like me, you're going to get drawn into the fonts and the header size and everything else when you're writing it. We're not going for form here. We're going for functionality. We're going for utility. A lot of the things you produce today are not going to be pretty, and that's okay. Nobody else has to see it. You don't have to share it with anybody. We're going for function over form, okay? So if you're in Word and you get distracted by the fonts, don't use it. Use Notepad or text editor or whatever else. You get my point there, plain text. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend 5 minutes. You're going to write down test ideas about an object that I pick out in the room. Okay? Anyone have any questions or thoughts about this before we get started? Go ahead.
Can we ask a question? Can we ask a question?
Right now you can ask me a question, but once we get started.
When you pick the object, can we ask a question about it?
No. Okay, so here's the thing too, right? So I know we're in a context-driven, strong environment. And I understand some of the pieces of this. I'm not an expert context-driven tester. Some of the principles I have little problems with, and we can talk about that sometime, right? One of them, a lot of people teach, hey, you've got this object in the room you're going to start testing. The first question is, what is the object? Well, I got to tell you, if you go to your CEO and you start talking about testing and she hands you a stapler and she says, go ahead and test the stapler, and you say, what is this? You need to go home. You know what a stapler is. You don't need me to tell you what a stapler is. So I'm going to pick out something we're all familiar with. We've all seen. It's very easy to work with. We know what it is. Go with your assumption on what it is, and we'll go from there. Is that fair? Okay. All right. And I didn't mean to shut you down. Any other questions? Not now. Not now, Paul. Nobody will ask another question the whole time. Okay. So the object is a chair, and our 5 minutes starts now. You hear the Casio sound, the old Casio watch? That's cool. Cool. So one of the things that I like about conferences is learning from others. So what I find when I speak at these is that generally I learn as much or more than anyone else sitting here, and it's because you all bring so much experience to this. So what I'd like to do is debrief and just have some, I'll kind of guide us with a couple of questions. You guys okay with that? Okay, so let's spend a few minutes debriefing. So anyone want to share their struggle with this? Did anyone struggle with this and they're willing to share what they struggled with or how they struggled? You're willing to share? Is it Carol? Is that right? Hey, Carol. Uh-oh, she's not hot. We could try one of these too, if you don't mind standing up, or I could come over there and you could talk into my mic. Or just speak loudly, that's fine too. Do you mind trying this one? Check, check. Does it work?
There are lots of different...
Just share with me and I'll repeat it.
There are lots of different kinds of chairs, recliners, work chairs.
Lots of different kinds of chairs.
Chairs that need to be stored, chairs that don't need to be stored.
Okay.
There are so many kinds of chairs.
So many kinds of chairs. So why was that a struggle for you? Why was the number of different kinds of chairs difficult? I should have specified, right? I should have said the chair you're sitting on. That would have been better. It made the number of options huge. Okay. Okay, that's fair. All right, so you struggled to write test cases because there were so many options. Okay, fair enough. I like that. What else? Anyone else want to share a struggle or a challenge they had?
There's that anchoring bias, and I'm certain that I was just in my own space, and I did not consider diversity.
An anchoring bias that you had, and you didn't consider diversity. Diversity of chairs, so she considered a lot of diversity with chairs, and you didn't? Is that what you're thinking?
I consider chairs in my own context.
In your own context.
Reflecting on this for a second, that there are other contexts, like accessibility.
Yeah, or like space chairs, the ones in the Apollo program, or yeah, lazy boys. Okay, that's cool. So that's not what I was trying to get at with this, but I love the feedback, and this is really good. And I'm open to any and all thoughts. What else did we struggle with?
I wasn't entirely sure if I was testing or assessing attributes.
He wasn't entirely sure if he was testing or assessing attributes. Okay, tell us what you mean by that.
So, fitness for function, the chairs that we're working with here, are they linkable? Can they be used in a conference setting? Are they easily to stack, to store, and redeploy?
Okay. So all the features of a chair and
Right.
whether or not the attributes were what you were testing, or if you could actually, if we wanted to know if the attributes were there, the existence of the attributes, those types of things. Okay. Okay. Who came up with, did anyone else have a thought on struggles or challenges they wanted to share? Okay. Put up your hand if you thought of at least one test case. Okay, great. All right. Who thought of at least 5 test cases? Okay. How about 10? Nice. We got a good group here. Okay, 15? All right. 20. All right, this is the knockout round. So 2, 3 folks with 20. Anybody have a lot more than 20? What's that? 14? What's that? You've got a lot. You weren't counting. Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. So the number of test cases for you was easy. I think that we struggle with testing and creating test cases for a couple different reasons. Number one, I think we have a group of different types of people in testing. And what I see at client sites when we're working with testers is I see some folks who have been trained as a tester to follow a script. The type of person that is willing to follow a script generally has different attributes to them than the person who is willing to create a script. They might be the same, they might be similar. You may be able to do both of those things, but there are people who like to create the script and like people who like to follow a script a lot of times. They're 2 different types of things. Were you going to share something? Okay. I also think that we have different kinds of testers. There are testers who like to explore, testers who like to follow the program. Just different types of people in the testing world. Testers who are more experienced and have more education, testers who have less. So Anne-Marie, you came up with a lot of different ideas. Was there something in your past, something in your experience that taught you how to do that?
When I first started
She got stuck after about 5 tests.
Yeah, yeah. And then I thought, well, hang on a second. That can't be the end of the ideas.
Okay.
There's some ideas out there. There's got to be, what can I link to that will help kind of get through the first 5? And then I thought, well, that's when I had the idea of different rooms.
Different
So
rooms.
I thought, well, hang on, I'm thinking about one room, the dining table, but actually there's a kitchen table, then
Kitchen
there's
table.
the office table.
Okay.
So I started thinking of all the different contexts, and
Different.
that kind of got the ideas going again.
Okay.
And then, and then I went and I thought about, well, hang on a second. Then I went back to like testing, and I thought, well, all the different quality attributes. So I'm thinking, how can I apply security to a chair?
How could I apply security to a chair? Performance to a chair.
How can I apply-
Right.
I started using my experience in testing against the chair to come up with ideas.
Right. Used your experience in testing to come up with the ideas. So there were a lot of things going on there in what you just said, and I'm sure it's very difficult when talking to me and to the room here about this to remember exactly where you got each idea and each experience, and it would take us forever to explore those. But if you have very little experience in testing and you've never heard of performance testing and you don't know what security testing is, or if you have a very shallow understanding of each one of those, it's much more difficult to come up with ideas related to those for other things. And then where is it in your head? Can you access it at this particular moment to use it? You stopped and said, okay, I actually want to make a concerted effort to embrace other ways of thinking and figure out which test I'm going to try, right? There was some activity in your head that did that. And you talked about it. You said, I stopped and thought, wait, this can't be the end of it. I can't be stuck at 5. You're willing to push on. We have different tolerances for that. Each person in here is more or less willing at different points in time to do those things, right? I've got a lot on my mind. There are days when I can't think of more than 5 tests. And there are days when I can sit down and block off time and actually think of a gazillion, right? So we all have different ways of doing that. So what are some ways to get more of these? Well, this one exercise alone hopefully just shows you, look, you can write for 5 minutes or you can't to do this. I would like you to be able to take that one home and try it again on different objects. I would recommend, now that I've gotten this feedback, to make sure to use something in the room that's physical that you can see. Use the chair that you are sitting on or something along those lines rather than all the other possibilities, and we'll limit it, make it a little bit better with that. So let's move on to the next one. This brought me to kind of thinking about what is a test, and I've had this idea before. I've sat down and investigated what's a test many times in my career, and some of these concepts you have to come back to. And in order to get better, you have to explore what your definition is for something, and then figure out, does my new experience, how does that work with my understanding that I had before? Do I need to change my definition? One of the models that I'm working with the test right now is just the concept that I have a model. There are 2 types of tests. There's an exploratory test, and there is an experimental test, and they are 2 different things. An exploratory test, we have methods for. We have clear methods out there from exploratory testing we can use. We can also just be curious and just be good with applications, and we can go through that. It's a more free-form kind of art if you don't use the methods that are out there. So there are kind of divisions within just exploration to find whatever's going on in the application. That's a creative pursuit in a lot of ways. The other one, experiment, we all know from the scientific method we were taught in high school. You have a hypothesis. I believe that if I press the blue button, a green message is going to come up on the screen. I press the blue button, does a green message come up or not? It's a pretty simple positive test case, right? That's my baseline. From there, I've got variables that I can work with. I could press the button twice. I could change, my browser. I could use a different resolution. I could use a different device. All kinds of things that I could do to play around with that one thing and change one variable at a time in order to learn more about my experiment. So my current model that I'm working with is these 2 concepts of experiment versus exploratory. Certainly you can use them in conjunction, but they're 2 different types of things. So what is a test? You all have to figure that out. I'm sure you've got your own definitions. It's worth thinking about and getting into if you haven't in a while. So if there are smokers in the room, I'm sorry. If there are people trying to quit, that's even worse. I quit in 2007, 11 years and 8 months, I believe it is, that I quit. December the 30th is my day, 2007. You can do it too. It is uncomfortable, but you can do it if I can do it. Bad ideas. So I love business as well. I like learning about how businesses are made, how they're run, what we do with them, why other people create businesses, why you all are in the businesses you are. All this is very exciting to me. It may sound boring as can be to you. That's fine. I was listening to a podcast about business. A lot of people come to you and they say, I've got this billion-dollar idea. And it's just this idea. We're going to make fruit cakes that are made with mint, and we're going to make billions of, I don't know, right? Ideas are easy. People come up to you with ideas all the time. People get upset about, I had this idea and so took it and they made $1 million off of it, and it was my idea. I had somebody come to me this week, yesterday, and say, oh, you can have that idea, I just want the royalties. And I said, that's not how it works. An idea is pretty much worthless with regard to business. All you have to do is pick something and iterate over it as hard as you can and learn the skills of business to make it work. And you don't stop. That's what I've learned so far. I will adjust that definition as I go along, right? But that's what I figured so far. The idea that you start with is going to be different by the second day or third day anyway. So ideas are not that helpful. But a lot of people get stuck on this. And I think that there was an exercise in this podcast that we can use. So let's take the concept of a chair, and this time we're going to use the chair that you're sitting in, and I want you to think about bad testing ideas, okay? In the podcast, they were talking about bad business ideas. And they said, here, what's a bad business idea? And they did this activity of brainstorming, and one of them was pool darts, like yard darts, but you play it in the pool, and you have an inflatable target in the pool, and everybody's in the pool playing yard darts with the big metal tips, right? Okay, several problems, you know, being impaled would be the top one. The second being you can only play the game once because the inflatable target sinks and you're done, right? Terrible business idea. Let's come up with some bad test ideas. So this time we're only going to do 3 minutes. I want you to take the chair and come up with bad ideas. I'm not going to tell you what bad means. You're going to have to figure out what bad means for yourselves. Bad testing ideas about the chair. You guys ready? Any questions? I want to be more open to questions this time. I'm sorry. And let's, oops, can't seem to get the click to work here. Can't find my mouse now. Here it is. There's always a technical glitch. There we go, all right. Let's go. As many bad ideas as you can about the chair that you are sitting on. right, pencils up, they would say, right? Pencils up. Let's debrief. Who struggled with this? Who had trouble with this? A lot more people, right? This is more difficult. Okay, who wants to share a struggle they had with it? Or share a really bad idea for testing a chair? Is it Kim?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought one of the bad ideas was burning the chair.
Was what?
Burning your chair.
Burning your chair. Okay. All right, what makes that bad?
You no longer have a chair to test with.
You no longer have a chair to test with. Okay, repeatability. Okay, all right. Fire codes would probably be, yeah. Danger. Go ahead.
I want to push back against that because the assumption is we have more than one chair that is breaking that chair without gas fire. It creates accelerant effect that makes the fire worse.
Okay, so Carol says, I want to push back, I want to resist that. I love it, right? That's what we're supposed to do as testers, right? We're supposed to be skeptical. I love it. So she's testing your idea now. That's fine. So she says, we want to know, are there accelerants in the chair? Is there some reason that the chair might burn too hot? And the assumption would be on her part that there would be lots of chairs to work with. All right, fair enough. I like that idea.
We're trying to figure out what a bad idea meant. Like,
What does a bad idea mean?
like, some of mine falls like bad as useless. Like it's the pointless task that doesn't actually tell us anything meaningful.
Uh-huh.
Like how many dinner mints can I stack on it?
How many dinner mints can I stack on it? Is that a bad idea or not? I'm just repeating so everyone can hear. Yeah.
And then some of them were like potentially fraught with negative outcomes.
Some of them were fraught with negative outcomes.
Like, if I throw something.
If I throw it, okay, all right, yeah. Anyone else want to share a bad idea or some challenges?
Useless with unethical.
It combines, yours combines useless wit,
With unethical.
useless with unethical.
Animal testing. How many elephants can the chair test?
How many elephants can the chair support?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's unethical because the chair wouldn't like it? Oh, the animals, right, right. PETA's going to be in here in a minute. I'm serious trouble here.
And it doesn't tell us anything.
It doesn't tell us anything either. That's interesting. Okay, all right.
Mine were more around safety,
Safety?
because I've probably done this these in my lifetime. Or see my children try to do something unsafe,
She's done all the unsafe things. Okay.
but yeah, that's where kind of like my mind went for bad ideas.
Your mind went for bad ideas once you started thinking of all the terrible things your kids or you do or have done on chairs. I like it. Go ahead, Carol.
My bad ideas were such that my purchase and no more than 3 so say like you put a 200-pound weight on the seat to test that there's a weight requirement met. Well, that weight is putting any pressure on the back of the chair and the durability is defined by both the seat and the back of the chair.
Okay.
The weight isn't evenly distributed.
Okay.
So that test would tell us only if it would collapse if a weight were put there, not if a person were put there.
So if you couldn't hear Carol, she was saying if you had a 200-pound weight and you put it on the seat of the chair, what would happen? That's one idea, but it doesn't necessarily tell us about the capacity of the chair because the back of the chair would also have some force that would be directed downward and cause a part of that weight as well. All right, nice. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was trying to talking with thinking of that. So should this be related to the chair or the process of the testing?
Should the bad part be related to the chair or the process of testing the
For
chair?
example,
Okay.
the bad idea is to perform brilliant tasks and not making any notes, or test without permission,
Say that again. If you did a test with no notes on it,
without making any notes.
so that's the process piece. Okay.
Or testing without permission.
Or testing without
That's
permissions.
right now, but nobody gave permission.
It's not your chair. You have no permissions over it. Should you be testing something that's not yours? This all comes down to like property rights. We could get very philosophical about this very quickly. This would be very cool. All right. So those are wonderful. Now notice what we've been doing is really just brainstorming. Okay, now brainstorming can go awry very quickly. And one of the things that we're noticing is in this activity, we're adding judgment into the activity. True brainstorming, what we do is we separate judgment from the creative part, okay? The brain gets really messed up with this if you try to do both at the same time. And it's why a lot of writers will tell you, I don't edit and write at the same time. What I do is I get everything out onto the page as quickly and as whatever, as soon as the idea can come to me, I put it on the page, and I get all the ideas out in some form or fashion, and then I take a break, I step away from it, and I come back and I edit later. Because when we begin editing and judging the ideas that are going on there, We're working with the analytical side of the brain rather than the creative side of the brain. The other thing that happens in a group, you guys have noticed this? You start talking through ideas, and someone says, but wait a minute, that won't work, right? So then we get stuck going down this path of what won't work and defending our ideas rather than coming up with new ones. If we can spend our time and our mind share coming up with the new things, we get more on the board, more ideas on the board, more ideas on your pad, more bad ideas if you want them, and you can come back later and judge them because we can get into our analytical judging mind later on. Some people have more ability at one than the other. My Myers-Briggs has a big, giant, bold-faced J in it, okay? I am judgmental. That's a part of my makeup, a part of my personality. In order to do brainstorming and in order to have a conversation like this that we're having, I have to take that J and be like, just sit back there for a little while. Let's just talk through this and listen, okay? It's very difficult for me. I don't even know what I'm judging most of the time. So different people have different abilities with these things. Some are going to be better at taking that J and putting it behind them. Some are going to be better at other things. And we want to use all of those things if we can. We're going to do one last exercise. I want you to take this one home with you. What's one thing you could do to take that bad idea and turn it into a good idea? Okay, so if it's pool darts, terrible idea for business, right? What can I do to make it better? What if the tip is not a metal tip on that thing, a metal pointy sharp tip, and instead it's a nice soft Nerf Velcro ball that would stick onto the target? Now we've got an idea that could work, right? Interesting technique to work through with your ideas. Take your test back with you, think through them. What's one little thing that I could change about this test to make it a good test? Good on that one? Here's the next thing that I see a lot, writer's block. We all talk about writer's block. Same idea as motivation. We all think we have to be motivated to do something. That's just silliness. What you have to do something is do it. And what happens with motivation is once you start doing a thing, you become more motivated to do it. The feeling comes after doing the activity, not before many times. So with writing, what we would do is we would sit in these workshops and they would say, I want you to put your pen on the paper and do not let it leave and do not stop it from moving for the next 3 minutes. What we're going to do is very similar. We're going to take 3 minutes, we're going to do this exercise, and you're going to write about, you can either choose the chair again, or you can choose a feature that you're working on or have worked on recently. And I just want you to write about it. There's no judgment involved here. We're not looking for good writing. I don't care if you create perfect sentences. I don't even care if there's a verb or a noun in it. It can be a fragment. Just write. Don't worry about any of that. Just get what's in your head out onto the paper and do not stop writing. If you're typing, don't stop typing. We good? Any questions? All right, let's go. Okay, pins up. Quickly before we're out of time here. Any thoughts come to you doing this activity? Probably haven't had time to digest it yet.
It got a little easier as I went along.
It got easier as you went along?
My brain started filling in more words and more ideas.
Yeah. Did it make any sense? Have you read what you wrote yet? You may not have read it yet. Sometimes you don't know what you wrote. What's that?
More sense at the end than the beginning.
Makes more sense at the end than the beginning? Okay. All right. Did anybody notice that just moving their hand was changing what was going on in their head? An artist exercise where you sketch just to sketch. Yeah. And it flows.
Crap at the end of the day.
Yeah. You may end up with crap. Right. But there's something there. You did something that day.
Not worrying about what I'm writing was really helpful for me because it was I gotta go edit that something now.
Just writing it and not editing it was helpful for you. Awesome. Cool. Do you think you could take some of these back to testing? Back to your teams? Work through this together? You're in a Scrum planning session and you want to talk through an idea. Hey, can we stop just a minute and brainstorm how we would test that? Just all the terrible ways we could do it? I think you're going to have fun with the bad test idea. That's a fun one, I think. Cool. So it's time now for questions, I think. Or thoughts. And I appreciate you guys joining with me to do this. It's a little different. The bad idea as well with writing, if you can take a concept and just try to write it as poorly as you can when you're stuck, sometimes that will help you open up to why things are poor already and how you can do it better. So doing things backwards sometimes is an interesting way to do things better forwards. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Who's
Paul.
ready?
And then if you want to throw up your green cards now, and then I'll write them down as I see them. And then I can run a mic to you, or you're feel free to step up to one of the mics. Okay, we'll start with 44. If you can, if that mic works for you, otherwise.
I don't think those are working, but I'll be happy to repeat.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, it does work. Okay, great. Wow. Actually, this is the first time. I'm just going to kind of make a comment on this and sort of a compliment. I thought this was a really cool idea to, first of all, exhaust your mind sort of on what kind of tests I can do, and then come up with okay, what are some really stupid tests that I would have obviously never do? And then that third piece was really critical in terms of like looking at those bad ideas and saying, well, how can I turn that around? And actually, I came up with another 10 good test ideas by critiquing the bad ones and great new product features too. Well, what if it could do this? And wouldn't that enhance the product? So I thought that was a good technique. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and so I found the same thing. One of the things that I did when I was programming before I got more into testing was I would have a bug and I'd be looking to try to figure out the bug. And what you do when you're doing that, all of you have tried to do the same thing. I'm sure you're looking through the code, you're trying to figure out where the bug is, okay? That can be very difficult, tracing through the code. Your brain gets stuck in the way the code works today. And what I would do at some point, I figured out, okay, I'm going to try to recreate the bug. What code would I write if I wanted to make this bug happen? And then I start writing the code, and suddenly I go, oh, got it. I know exactly where the problem is. So the way we work with our brain, the more tools we have in our brain to use, the better off we can do at these things.
This seemed to be mostly about brainstorming and the pitfalls of brainstorming. Are there other ideation techniques that you use that are on a totally different axis?
Yeah, other ideation. So I know I'm not the best tester in the room. First, I should have started with that. I'm probably not the best writer in the room, too. I'll tell you that as well. But I wanted to share with you what my experience was. Are there other techniques that I use not relative to writing or places? Absolutely. So one of the things that I found in working with, I have a business coach who's helped me learn a lot. And one of the things that she's taught me is she would put a spreadsheet in front of me and we'd share the spreadsheet. And I hated spreadsheets. Like, who hates spreadsheets? Some people in here have mad passions about hating spreadsheets. I get it, right? I totally understand that. But she would put a spreadsheet in front of me, and she'd start working in the spreadsheet and putting down thoughts. And as she was working, she was finding that there were multiple dimensions of the ideas that we were working on, and she was figuring out what those dimensions were. And what I've found over time is sometimes if I force myself into a format like a spreadsheet, it makes my brain work in a different way than if I was brainstorming. It makes it work in a different way than if I were writing. Same thing with mind maps, I believe. You start working on mind maps and you look at dependent thoughts, you look at chains of thoughts. And so just the format of that makes your brain work in a certain way. So all of those tools together, the more of them you have, the more ways you see different things, sometimes just the format you put something into can really change the way you think about it.
34, same thread.
I couldn't quite rock what was going on in that spreadsheet example. Can you give more
Oh,
detail?
sure. So she said he couldn't quite understand the spreadsheet idea. I don't know if I can come up with a good example on the spot.
Okay. All right.
The idea basically that so just trying to explore a thought, and you're looking at how do I model this thought? Are there certain attributes to it? And I'm putting them into a spreadsheet and say, okay, I'll use browsers for instance. I'm thinking about browsers and what I do with a browser in testing. Let's use a spreadsheet, let's look at it. So I put browsers down one side and I just start listing them out. And there's this big list of browsers. And I say, what am I looking at on each one of those browsers? Oh, well this one's JavaScript, this one's JScript, maybe in old school world. This one's supported, this one's not supported. I've got different attributes of each of these, different dimensions to work on. Which is supported, which is not supported, right? Because I'm in the spreadsheet, I'm starting to find columns. So supported is one column, yes or no, and then JavaScript enablement is another one. Which operating systems they work on is another one. So I'm exploring this idea and I'm gaining more and more attributes as I go along, and that's changing the way that I think about it and the information that I bring to solving whatever problem it is. Does that help a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I use matrix or spreadsheets quite a bit in my testing because I write my spreadsheets in a matrix, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to test these 9 things, and I need to test them on iOS, I need to test it on Android, I need to test it on Chrome, I need to test it on Safari, whatever. And I use it to keep track of what I've tested it on. But I also use it for my team because I'm like, okay, here are all the things we need to test. Lisa's going to cover this, Brooke's going to cover this, and we kind of go through, and that's how we assign it a lot of times. But we use spreadsheets all the time just so we can keep track of where we're testing what and that we've got it all covered. And it's a great visualization. But that's why we use our spreadsheets for test cases a lot of times.
Yeah, so I'm not saying you have to use a spreadsheet. I'm not saying you have to learn to write. I'm not saying any of these things. I'm just trying to share with you things that have worked for me, and I'd love to learn what else has worked for you all. What tools do you all use? I'd love to hear as well, but it sounds like we have another question or what?
New thread.
Okay. Hey, Andy.
Hey, Paul. Good exercise. I liked the first and the second. It really shows the contrast of general requirements and all the test cases when it's just a chair. Because I started looking at all the conditions and scenarios. Is this a beach chair? Is it a card table chair? And I found myself writing a lot of test cases. When you went to the specific and said it's a chair for this kind of a setting, this kind of condition, then I realized some of those other scenarios were no longer relevant. To the real world, I think Scrum Masters and product owners would really find appreciation in an exercise like this, that it wouldn't be just for testers. Because the struggle we have sometimes in minimal viable product or story grooming lends ourselves to not fully understanding what are the conditions that we should be testing for. Any thoughts on that?
I'm with you. I think there's lots of ways we can learn from any one of these activities. If you see other ways to apply it, that's great. I totally agree with you. I think oftentimes we get our heads stuck in one area, whether we're a product owner, a manager, anybody else, and it's difficult to get out of it. So we use these tools to come out of where our mindset is and try something different and see what comes from that. So I don't know if I answered anything or whatever, but thank you for the comment.
New thread 115.
Something you said really stuck out to me that I'll definitely be taking back to my teams is that true brainstorming, you have to separate the judgment from the idea. In a room of engineers that are all big, fat, giant J's, do you have good techniques to kind of help stop the judgment discussions that are frankly inevitable in those teams, in a kind way, of course? but to kind of get back on track with the creative and ideation
I
side.
was good until you said it had to be kind. No, I hear you absolutely, right? That's exactly what happens, and I think one of the things that's so difficult is that we're trying to solve problems. We're trying to make things better. We're trying to whatever. That's a big part of what we're doing as engineers, what many of us as testers are doing, what many product owners are doing, what many managers are doing. It's a problem-solving activity. I don't know. I haven't thought of the best ways to do that. I know for myself, it's really a matter of practice and with a team and just a timeout. Say, look, guys, when we do this activity, if we're getting off base, I'm going to facilitate. I'm not coming up with any of the ideas. You all are. I'm not telling you what. I'll show you the exercise. You all practice it. And if something's going awry, I'm going to say timeout. And when you see me timeout, we're all going to stop and we're going to reset. So when we reset, let's remember, no judgments. We're not looking for analytical stuff here. We're just being creative because we want as many ideas as possible on the board. I don't know if that helps, but practice helps.
So just a comment to you, Ashley. So what we apply, a technique, is whenever we have a conversation, the word but is forbidden. And we have to replace it with and. And it really changes the way you think if you cannot use the but, because often you use but just to present the opposite opinion or challenge the opinion.
Yeah.
And when you force you to say and, it's like you don't have that power because you have to add something on top of it, right?
Yeah, and there was, anybody ever improv in drama class or anything like that?
Yes.
You remember improv? You can never solve the problem. You remember that? And you couldn't say but, and you couldn't stop the activity that was going on. You couldn't control it and say no. You had to add on to whatever was going there. That might be, it's similar to what you're saying, the same concept, yeah.
It's just something that I learned from, there's a book called Edward de Bono, is Lateral Thinking, and he talks about suspending judgment. So don't try and stop judgment because it's really, really impossible to some degree. But if you can time box it and say, you know, I understand that there's lots and lots of other things, but for this point in time, we're just going to suspend it rather than not do it. I think that helps.
Yeah, that was awesome. What was the book again? Judgment?
Lateral thinking.
Lateral Thinking?
Yes,
Edward Tabano? De Bono. Okay. I just want to repeat it, make sure everybody got it. Thank you.
So one of the things that our team has discussed is that we're not allowed, in our working agreement, we said we weren't allowed to be dicks to each other. And it was, we went to put it on the wall, and they said, well, that's not really work appropriate. We got to change that. So instead it got changed to we're not allowed to be ducks to each other. So in meetings, when somebody's being a duck, we call them out. We quack at them. And and eventually you could get all of us quacking at you because you're being a duck and it's very obvious. And so that's how it could start by just somebody sent you a duck meme telling you that, hey, that wasn't very nice. Or it could be just someone all of a sudden quietly quacking at you, or somebody quacks very loud at a meeting because you need to be called out immediately.
Do people ever quack at each other, like one starts quacking, you're like, you're quacking like a duck.
Yeah.
I'm going to quack at you. Yeah? Nice. Thank you for
All
sharing.
right, for a time check, we have about 2 minutes left, so if you have any other questions, if not, I've got one waiting in the chamber. Okay, so Paul, I'm wondering, since you kind of started a little bit about writing and how writing can be helpful for the creation of ideas, for the testers that are here today, if they wanted to start a blog and kind of test more or write more about some of these test ideas and how to use them and kind of share that with their teams or with the world, what would be a good tip for them to get started on going and creating that content?
Just do it. I do believe a plan is good, and I believe that having a strategy and a goal is good. But there is no substitute for acting. It takes so little effort to go out to Blogspot, to go to WordPress, to go to Medium, to go onto LinkedIn or whatever and post something. It takes even less effort to open up WordPad or whatever it is and start typing. If you want to write, write. And you're going to learn a lot more about yourself, the way that you think, the way that you explore ideas, the concepts that are in your mind, what's undefined, the work you have to do. I have learned a ton through creating presentations, through creating workshops, through writing on blog posts, through writing reports for our consultations. It sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but I get really strong concepts out of that, and I realize areas where I need to go back and work on some things. Do something, get the ideas out of your head. Nothing exists until it's on paper.
All right, if there's no further questions, thank you, Paul, for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good day. Enjoy CAST.